Hi, you're listening to Listed by Mina Kuper. We're about real estate, trust, probate, divorce, and more. You're listening to 98.1 FM, 1220 AM. You can also watch us and listen to us on KHTS radio app or the KHTS hometown station page on Facebook. And today I have Richard Wong from Viridian Mortgage, and he is an expert in his field. He's got some really crafty ways to get your payments down, and we were just talking about it before we hopped on the show, and we'd love to talk to you about it. Richard, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So we were just talking about the buy-down options, and I think it's so spectacular, and I give $6,000 in closing costs. So between everything, these people are going to get a good deal when they're buying property.
Right. So as we've seen in many communities and metropolitan areas around the state, the tide is turning for buyers. It's slowly but surely becoming more of an equal market, more of a balanced market. And in doing so, we've seen a lot of our clients are able to negotiate credits in escrow, which is also normal in a more balanced market. And whether those credits come from lenders or sellers or even the agents, they can use that credit instead of just a lump sum number at escrow. They can actually use that credit to reduce the interest rate so that they can have an easier transition into the full principal and interest payments. And so one of the most appealing programs that we've had recently is called a 2-1 buy down. And that's where you reduce the interest rate by a full 2% in that first year when you're just getting used to the higher cash flow demands. And in the second year, it's reduced by 1% before rising to the full principal and interest payment in the third year. And so we've had a lot of interest in there, especially with the general sentiment that there is going to be a strong likelihood of a refinance opportunity within that first 2 years. And even if they are able to refinance to a lower rate, it's not like they lose the benefit of any credit that was remaining. They actually get that credit returned to them in the form of a principal reduction. So it's an important distinction to make between like paying points for a rate, which you don't really enjoy the benefit of until more time has passed. And so the credit is 100% realized no matter whether you stay in the home for 6 months or 2 years or 20 years. You'll get the full benefit of that credit.
Yeah, and I think it's great because, people are panicky, right? And people don't realize when markets shift, there are other opportunities that come up. And this is an example of one, right? And also, the prices went down. It's not like they're selling hotcakes in the stands for $1, right?
Right.
It's that's what it was. It was like a frenzy before in a market that was unusual. But now the rates, the pricings are coming down. So between the price coming down, opportunities to pay less interest on the first couple of years and then probably refinance after that into something even better so you can ride the wave. What a great time to buy. I mean, this is a great opportunity. I personally, I'm a real estate owner. I buy properties, investment properties. I find that the value is in a shifting market about being a buyer. It opens so many opportunities.
I completely agree, Mina, because I've been pouring into some of the data and some of the economic reports recently, and there's a lot of information out there. But it's just amazing to me that most people will make their decisions based on feelings and emotion rather than on facts and data. And it just goes to show, like, my experience is the same. It's like when I broke into the mortgage industry, people were most concerned that homes were too expensive and the interest rates were too high and they weren't sure whether they could afford the payment. But those are concerns that have been echoed in every single generation. And what happens is
something new, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the business long enough where I've seen the final chapter in a lot of those stories, and it's usually those concerns are replaced by regret when people are thinking, boy, I was lucky I bought at that price, and in fact, I should have bought two. And it's just funny how it's different that way. And if you look at the economic data and where we've come from, we've overcome earthquakes, we've overcome the dot-com bust, the financing crisis of 2008, recessions, wars, and so the one true, I guess, as far as investment goes, there's no greater. If there's anything close to like a sure thing, it's California real estate, and especially if you're looking at a long-term picture.
Market, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to advise somebody to buy if they're going to hold it short-term for an investment or for a flip. That's not the audience I'm speaking to. It's really your normal first-time home buyers who really want to settle down and live in a property for a long-term period. Then it removes a lot of the anxiety and uncertainty out of the equation when you just show them, the best time to buy is actually when nobody else is buying. When inventory is low and interest rates are high, it doesn't sound appealing, but there are other factors in play, like values are going down, and you don't have to bid with 12 other people to get into a home right now, and you can negotiate for credit.
And overbid on a property on top of that, right?
Right. But it's easier said than done because, like I said, so much emotion goes into play, not just for buyers, but for sellers as well. They feel like their home is always worth more than it really is, and it takes them some time to kind of meet that reality.
So are they rolling out more bank statement programs, for people that have a mixed bag of,
Sure.
income verification, if you will? That's probably a good way to put it.
Yeah, we call it the non-QM space. QM stands for qualified mortgage, which means that a lot of these lenders, a lot of these loan programs are sold on the secondary market to private investors. And so you get a lot more creativity than what you can typically find with the guidelines of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And so you get things like bank statement loans and asset depletion loans, and then different ways and debt service income loans for investment properties. But for your average self-employed borrowers, sometimes it's difficult to document your income. And so for example, the bank statement program is an excellent way to show that via your bank statements and bank deposits instead of having to furnish tax returns. And so, of course, the risk goes up for the lender, and which is why the interest rate's a little bit higher. But at least it's an option, for self-employed borrowers to have an opportunity to buy a home.
Right. How are the interest-only, ARMs doing? What do you think of those these days?
I love interest-only features
because right?
You just have that cash flow flexibility to be able to pull back to just paying the interest if needed. And so, again, for the self-employed borrowers, when income is inconsistent, some months are better than others, and if you need to, you have that opportunity to pull back and just pay the interest alone. The interest-only feature used to be just like a toggle switch, and you could have it or you could not have it, and the pricing and the terms were the same. But since 2009 or 2010, a lot of the lenders will consider the interest-only feature an exotic feature, which means it's actually not non-QM. And so it is a little bit more expensive, usually about 0.1% higher for that interest-only feature. So because of that, it's a kind of a case-by-case basis whether I recommend it or not.
And the good thing is, especially with first-time home buyers, it probably won't be their last house they buy. So it makes sense to pay interest only. Historically, California prices have gone up, right? And so if they're first-time home buyer, they do interest only. Chances are by the time the rate adjusts, they'll be ready for the next house.
I am a huge proponent of that for the right situation and for the right borrower. So the usual concern is like, oh, okay, so you reduce your cash flow, that's nice, but then the extra money that you save and you retain by not having to pay down principal is great, but then what do you do with it? If you go and take it and spend it frivolously, then it's probably not such a good idea. But if you take it and invest it wisely, perhaps invest in other real estate vehicles, then it's kind of a no-brainer as far as return, because as soon as you pay down principal into your mortgage, it becomes illiquid and you don't get a return on it. And so it doesn't make any sense on paper for you to ever pay down principal. And so I know it goes against the grain of everyone as far as just the emotional feeling of having debt over you, but it's actually ideal to like have the biggest mortgage possible whenever you dispose of the house, whether that's by selling or otherwise.
Yeah, and up to $750,000, they get to write off the interest of their mortgage.
There's the tax advantages for sure.
Oh my God! Between paying interest only, doing the tax advantage, and the write-off, it's amazing.
Yeah, and your home's going to appreciate the exact same amount whether you have a mortgage or not.
Yeah.
It is completely independent. Exactly. And that's one of the great things about owning real estate is that you can leverage it with a mortgage.
Do you see that, like when people are doing comps, I think an advantage to buying is sometimes when the appraisal comes in, the prices have reduced, which is great for buyers because, Mr. Seller, the appraisal came back at this. Well, guess what? They're going to lower their price. Usually, of course they can pull out, but what are they going to do? It is what it is, right? So they buy something for, let's say, $900,000 hypothetically, and the appraisal comes back at $850. Just get in the deal, right? I mean, the market is shifting all day, every day, so it's an advantage to the buyers.
Totally, yeah. I think it's a lot more benign these days when the market is more balanced, simply because the seller is a little bit more willing to reduce the price if the appraisal comes down. But I remember like 2 or 3 years ago, even when it was firmly a seller's market, the sellers held all the leverage. And if the appraisal came in, the buyer really didn't have a choice but to have to pay down more down payment in order to reach the acceptable loan-to-value ratio. But nowadays, it's a lot better. It's a lot more reasonable for buyers, fortunately.
Yeah, and like I said, I remember people calling me. They were so frustrated because they didn't have the extra $40,000 or $30,000 in cash because the house is at a certain amount to be competitive with the other buyers, and it really kept them frustrated. It wasn't, even though it's great for refis and all that. There was 2%, it's wonderful, but on the buy side, you were paying top dollar for that house. So, I mean, here may be a better opportunity to get into the market as a buyer because of the advantages that you have now and not having to come in with things that are as an inflated house, as inflated as it is, and then come in with an extra $30,000 on top of the appraisal value.
Yeah, I agree. The issue when prices were increasing so rapidly was that the comps weren't coming in fast enough. So even though everyone knew the house would sell for a certain value, you couldn't substantiate it with enough sales comps. And so the appraiser really many times had their hands tied and weren't able to justify a higher price based on sales comps. But now it's much more normal. Everyone can kind of breathe and relax, and buyers can be assured that appraisal reports are a little bit more accurate because things are moving a lot slower.
Right. I would get appraisers calling me and asking me if I thought differently about things. I was like, wow, because they were so confused themselves because things were just popping up, an extra $20,000, an extra $10,000. I was like, it was insane. They were like scared to put a price on things because it was so unusual.
Yeah. I think the time period between now and perhaps beginning or mid-February is really important for buyers. If you're in the market, I would definitely recommend to keep a close eye on it because as soon as the calendar flips and the market stabilizes a little bit, maybe inflation is tamed a little bit more. I know the Fed is going to start slowly decreasing the amount that they're increasing the federal funds rate by. Everything is looking a little bit more palatable, and people start jumping into the market. It's sensitive in these really high demand areas, and then prices could just flip pretty quickly.
Right.
So I think the window for buyers may be a lot shorter than they might expect.
Right, and
wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Because, people think, it's going to be like this for a while. You know what? We live in such a crazy world right now that you just can't predict anything. So when you have an opportunity where sellers are more flexible, go buy something. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? Is that what they say? You lose the horse. Right.
Right, and you can certainly wait, and values could certainly go down again.
Yeah.
But there's a risk to that. There's a risk to people to demand going back up, and sellers feeling, well, maybe I shouldn't issue this credit all of a sudden. So it's a very sensitive market, and I would just recommend that people just stay really close to the professionals in their circle, and maintain a close watch over it, even over the holidays.
Yeah. And exactly, and it's probably a good time to buy during the holidays, because I think sometimes, people will just be more interested in moving forward in life. The New Year's resolutions, all that. They don't want to stay stuck in where they are when they really don't want to be there. They may be more flexible.
Yeah, some of the best deals happen towards the end of December, I can tell you.
Right. That's right. That's what I say. You strike while the iron's hot, and people are quiet and not as focused. And the New Year's resolutions, we're going to move to Idaho, wherever, and then we want to sell our house and be with our kids. And here you go. These people have made up their minds. New Year, they just want to go. It's a great opportunity for buyers to start, sniffing out what's going to work for them, and I'm always happy. I love working with first-time home buyers as well. My niche is probate and all that, but first-time home buyers are so fun. They really are. They get so excited, They're not arguing usually. They're just so happy you got a good deal, you're in, and it's really cool stuff going on.
Right. They're very engaged. They're very passionate, and they have a keen interest in what's going on with the transaction. And they're also willing to learn.
Yeah, and also, I have an opportunity with a national TV show for buyers who want to be considered for the show. And I don't want to go into detail here, but it's a great opportunity for people to talk about their businesses on national TV. And, they're getting married, they're excited about everything, and have viewing parties around it. So it's a great fun. I'm on the happy side of things. I'm like the happy news, I just don't listen to the others anymore. I create my own news.
And it makes for great stories.
It makes for great stories. That's right. Exactly. So what's a good way for people to reach out to you? People can see us on Facebook and also on the app, besides being on the FMAM show. So different
fantastic.
Ways. We're all over now. Yeah. What's a good way for people to reach you?
Yeah, they can always Google Viridian Mortgage. That's Viridian with a V in Victor. I welcome anyone to call or text me. My line is 408-828-5609. Or you can reach me by email at richard@viridianmortgage.com.
That's amazing. And I know that you handle all of California.
Mm-hmm. All of California and only California. There's enough business in the state to last me a lifetime.
You think? We have a big state.
Definitely.
Right?
Even now.
People are hopping all over the place. But, it's good, because when you focused on a market, it's like going to someone who does 10 different things, right?
Right.
It's hard to keep up with all of that. So because the laws are different, California has some rigid laws and rules sometimes. And when you focus on one area, it gives you an opportunity to be the expert in that area because you really focused in on it. You're not all over the place.
Yes.
I'm
sorry, your voice went out a little bit, Mina.
No, I said, it's great when you're focused on one area because California happens to have some rigid rules. And, things are always changing here, right? And I think that when you have someone like yourself who's focused only in California, it allows someone to really get an expert in the area, because someone who's doing so many different states may not have the focus on all these rules and things that are going on, opportunities for people to get a buyer. They'll just go with whatever they see. You will investigate it because that's what you do.
Right. We talked about first-time home buyers just earlier, but one of my wheelhouse types of applicants are also second-time home buyers, because I'm actually an attorney, member of the state bar, and I used to do tax-related cases. So anything having to do with tax consequences or estate issues as it pertains to buying another home, because often my clients have a lot of questions about what they do with their departing residence, whether they should sell it, whether they should retain it as a rental, and all the tax and estate consequences that result from that decision. So those are California-specific, particularly things like Prop 19 and the ability to move your property tax base to another location. They get a lot of questions in that space. So for second-time home buyers, those are fantastic opportunities.
Yes, and right. There's so many props, and we are definitely a state in its own, if I must say so myself. It's like, hey, did you hear about this? I said, when did that happen? Oh, last night. They just said that. I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
Now let's put that down. Now I know that, too.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. It's like ping pong. Like, okay. But, nevertheless, we have beautiful weather 90% of the time, right? And people want to live here because we have beautiful weather, and the state is a beautiful state. So
it is. It is.
Yeah. So I want to thank you, Richard, for being on the show with me today. Always a pleasure. I love your knowledge. I love your dedication to your clients.
Thank you so much, Mina. Thank you for having me again.
All righty. Have a good rest of the day. Hi, you're listening to Listed by Mina Kuper. We're about real estate, trust, probate, divorce, and more. And we are listening to 98.1 FM, 1220 AM, KHTS Hometown Station, Facebook page, or the KHTS radio app. I have Melissa Zagadig on the phone and on the radio with me today. And we are really excited to talk about something that a lot of people don't talk about. And especially in California, a lot of people are inventing things and creating things, and people die, right? And then that's a situation that has to be handled by the proper professionals in order to resolve it properly. Melissa is an attorney that deals with copyrights, and it's an interesting topic because I've been asked that, and I'm like, this is an interesting topic. We have to have someone who really knows what they do in the situation where someone dies, and what is involved in the copyrights after death. Melissa, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you, Mina, for having me. So I do think this is an interesting topic, and believe it, one of the foundations of copyright law comes from the United States Constitution. I find that super interesting because who would have thought that?
Who would have thought, right?
Fathers put it in the Constitution, right?
Right? I mean, nobody would ever think that, even like dawn on them. And then when I saw that, I was like, wow, I didn't know that. This is what came to my mind.
Yeah, what happened was the Constitution, they wrote into the Constitution that the Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and the useful arts by securing for a limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So it's all spelled out right there that there is going to be a certain period of time that people who own copyrights will have those copyrights last.
That's amazing. So there's an end date to the copyrights lasting?
Yeah, so copyrights have a term or a length that they last. And what happens when someone dies is that copyright still continues to last after the death. It's generally 70 years past the life of the author that those copyrights last. And what makes that wonderful for heirs is that just because someone has become deceased doesn't mean that those copyrights end. And that's really not typical because, like, for example, Mina, with a contract for a recording artist, let's say, if a recording artist should become deceased, during the term of a contract, then that contract is just terminated. So there isn't anything that the heirs could take advantage of in terms of that contract for services of someone who became deceased. But when you have copyrights, if someone created a lot of musical compositions or plays or novels, when that author dies, typically that copyright's going to last for another 70 years after that. So the heirs to that person can continue to make money off those copyrights.
Interesting. So what exactly are copyrights? I know that there's a lot of words used around this whole trademark, copyrights, all that, and people may not be as clear about what it is exactly.
For sure. That's a great question. People are often confused about the differences in forms of intellectual property. So you're right that copyrights are often confused with trademarks. Trademarks are brand names of products or services like McDonald's or Starbucks or Gucci. Those are all marks. And copyrights are works fixed in tangible media, in any tangible medium of expression. And that includes literary works, musical works, dramatic works like plays, music, pantomimes, works of choreography, graphic design, motion pictures, and even, of course, sound recordings and architectural works. So don't let that language fool you. Works fixed in a tangible media, in a tangible medium. That's what copyright laws cover. And they protect someone who owns a copyright gets the right to prevent other people from creating a substantially similar work or displaying or distributing a substantially similar work. So it's a really strong protection, and important protection for creative people.
Yeah, and it's interesting, especially when there are several heirs involved, how this all gets distributed. Because, people think, about probate or when people die intestate, right? Or, even in inherited situations, sometimes the trust isn't spelled out exactly how this is all going to go down. And then people feel that they have a right to certain things. So it's not like people die and it's not only just property. That's why it's so important to have a proper trust in place, and also to consult someone like yourself when they're creating a trust so that you have the input of how to word the trademark, copyright abilities of inheritance, because, that's the whole different ball of wax, right? It's like having a surgeon who does hearts and then having someone who does foot, So, it's really important, I think, when people have more in their lives and elderly and their heirs are looking for a way to be peaceful about the parting of the person in death, then that should be really spelled out by someone who knows how to word it, because things become argumentative, right? And people argue all the time about these things. And then even there's a trust, they can go into litigation about all this. But I think if it's worded properly, at least you have a better chance of it being a smooth sail, if you will.
Yes, I think you gave a great example, and it's the example I use when I speak with clients, which is, it's like, asking a heart surgeon a question about your foot. It's basically
exactly right.
You need a specialist in that area. So I'm an entertainment and intellectual property transactional attorney in Beverly Hills, which means I cover copyrights and trademarks and all kinds of entertainment and music issues. So it's definitely important, if you are a creative person, if you can spell out in your will or trust what you want to have happen with your copyrighted works. That's really important, and I think it would give your heirs peace of mind as well, so they know that they're honoring your wishes.
Exactly. And that's why, these trusts, so when someone looks at the paperwork, the argument with the other heirs, potential arguing that can go on, is very limited because things are spelled out in detail.
Right. That's super important. Another thing to think about with copyrights that very few people are aware of is that there's something called a common law copyright, and some people have heard of this, which anytime you create a work, like the minute you put your pen to paper or brush to canvas, that work has common law or unregistered statutory, like covered by state law protection. However, the question would rise then where people want to know, why would I register a copyright with the Library of Congress then? And the reason you want to register your copyrights with at copyright.gov with the Library of Congress is because there's no substitute for that protection. If you register your copyrights in a timely manner with the Library of Congress, which means within 3 months of the date of publication or before then you get these certain rights as the copyright owner, which are amazing. They're called statutory damages, and that means you can collect up to $150,000 per work infringed. And one of the most amazing, crazy remedies that you can get is that if you have to sue someone for infringement and you've registered in a timely manner, you can sue that person and make them pay your attorney's fees. That's all statutory damages. So timely registration of your copyright is ultra important, and there's no substitution for it. Many people call me and think they can register with the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, and that's a substitute. It's not. Nothing is a substitute for registering at copyright.gov with the Library of Congress.
And the paperwork. So let's say I wrote a song, and I would copyright that song prior to having it out there, so that
that's the best.
Or a jingle that would be used in a commercial potentially.
That's the best course of action is before you even put it out. Like many of my clients will put things out in Google Play or
right.
Before you do that, or even before you put it on SoundCloud, you really want to register that copyright, and then you know that you're protected. That's the optimal thing to do.
Because otherwise somebody can say, what a great idea. And they listen to it, and they go copyright it before you do. Right. So they can say, right, they got it from themselves or whatever.
Yeah, that's why if anything ever goes to court about copyright infringement, it's really important that as a creator you have notes on when you created things, like in your example, if you wrote a song, whom you wrote that song with, when you first recorded what are called scratch vocals to it. Having notes to help you later if you had to go to court are very important.
Interesting. It's funny. I always wanted to write little jingles for commercials because I think like that, and some of them have been really cool. I just never did anything with them. But, it'd be interesting because then people, if they write jingles or something for a commercial or a product, they can actually, once they copyright it, can they sell it to the people that originate the product or the song?
It's something where you could either sell it to them or you could license it to them, and those are both.
I love that. You see, this become a whole business in itself.
Yeah. So licensing, the difference is if you sell something like your jingle, then you're giving up all rights to it and usually future revenue to it. But if you license, then you're going to get some money now and in the future where you can have what everyone dreams of, which is called a passive income.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so what a great way to protect yourself and be able to create things that can, be very monetarily beneficial for you and for the people you're selling it to,
Absolutely. I've had an interesting matter come my way a little while ago that was a woman who had a brother who was a very successful writer that she didn't even know about. And so helped her after he passed away to review all the contracts that he signed and figure out how she can monetize the novels that this person wrote. And that's been really rewarding because this is someone who didn't even know about that source of revenue. And it's also been interesting because it's involved a lot of foreign countries as well.
Oh, wow. That's great. So you can help with national, worldwide type of protection for people.
Yeah, and if I can't, the great thing is I've been practicing for about 22 years, so I know people who can help me see if I don't have contacts in a particular country.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say another thing listeners might find interesting is there's something called a termination of copyright transfers and licenses. So it's a little bit complex, but it's come to the forefront recently with a lot of composers for film and TV, where once a creator has died, there is something called a termination of copyright under Section 203 of the Copyright Act, and it permits authors or their surviving spouses or children or other heirs to terminate grants of copyright that were made in a certain time period. And so if you're someone who's inherited copyrights, but those copyrights are tied up in a license or were assigned or granted to a film studio, for example, then you may be able to, in fact, terminate those copyrights and take back those works for the person that you inherited them from, which is something that could be really, depending on who it is, of course, it could be a really great source of revenue.
So when someone is married, right, because community property state, someone's married and the spouse that passes away, does it go to the surviving spouse?
Yeah, and this is what you
Yeah, I was just curious, right? You get a family attorney or someone involved in this, or a probate estate planning attorney, right? Collaborate.
Sure. Yeah, according to basic community property law, it would go to the surviving spouse. And what I'm pointing out about the termination that's interesting, and this has happened recently with a lot of film composers, is that those rights can be reclaimed to some degree under certain circumstances under this Section 203 of the Copyright Act. So if you're a surviving spouse and you inherited some copyrights, sometimes in certain circumstances, there's a right of termination that you may possess so that you can reclaim those copyrights and then monetize them with a new company to get a new revenue source.
Very interesting. And so the copyright after death, how long does that last?
So a copyright generally lasts the life of the author plus an additional 70 years. And I get a lot of phone calls about people saying, is this in the public domain yet? So just because someone dies, it doesn't mean that the work becomes in the public domain. It has to do with the life of the author plus 70 years. And in fact, there is a wonderful chart that Cornell University puts online. If you just Google Cornell University copyright chart, there's this wonderful chart they created that is really helpful in determining if a copyright is still in effect to a certain work, if you're wondering.
Oh, interesting. So, when people register, how long does it take typically for it to be copyrighted from the beginning? Well, tell us about the process. Someone comes to Melissa and to your law firm, and they come tell you, I want to copyright this.
Yeah, so on my end, it usually takes less than a week, but the Copyright Office is very unpredictable lately. Ever since the pandemic, the Copyright Office and the United States Patent and Trademark Office have taken unusually long to register works. So in my experience right now, it's taken anywhere from 2 months to 12 months for the Copyright Office.
Wow. Melissa, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come right back. And I want the audience to come back with us because this stuff is really interesting. It's different. Hi, you're listening to Listed by Mina Kuper. We're about real estate, trust, probate, divorce, and more. And I have Melissa Dagadug on the phone, and she is a copyright attorney. And we were talking about, at this point, what happens with copyright after death.
That's right. I wanted to go into a little more detail and just say that for sure a copyrighted work does not necessarily become public domain when its owner dies. And the length of time a work is protected depends on when the work was made or published and when the author dies. And so according to modern American law, works made by individuals have protection that's the life of the author plus 70 years. And when the author dies, the ownership will just change. And that would mean that the ownership of the copyrights pass to the heirs. And so in that respect, copyrights are treated no differently than any other form of property. So ownership can be passed by a will or a trust to someone else.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, it's really just like any other asset that people would pass you, whether it's real estate or anything like that, except that copyrights have a length time that they last. And so it's important to consult with someone. If you are someone who's inherited some intellectual property, whether it's patents or trademarks or copyrights, it's important to consult with an intellectual property professional like myself to determine if that protection is still in place and how to monetize it.
Right, and especially when there's other people involved in this copyright. So, we can go on and on. I just find this fascinating, and I love that you can get it to this point because it's really a business in itself, for people that are doing this. Melissa, what is a good way for people to reach you?
A great way to reach me is they can call me at 310-699-8155. Or you can look up my website and click contact. My website is melissakdagodig.com. It's MELAISSA K like king, and then Dagodig, DAGODAG.com. So melissakdagodig.com, and you can just click contact there and shoot me an email.
That's wonderful. Melissa, I'm going to be on the lookout for people that need your services because, like I said, people don't think about this right in the forefront. They think of a house, right, all the usual, their investment accounts, but people don't think about this. I'm going to go looking for people because I think this is so important and such an opportunity for people to, have less to deal with later and monetize on what someone has created, their loved one has created. So I want to thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mina.
Have a great rest of the day.